Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk AppSecOps. My name is Mark Lambert, Chief Product Officer at ArmorCode, and I am joined by Steven de Vries from IriusRisk. And today we're going to talk about threat modeling. It's certainly something that has been coming up more and more within the community as a whole. 𝗵𝗿𝗄 community, we're currently working on application security maturity model, and Brooke Schofield is part of that. And threat modeling is a key element for making sure you develop a mature practice. And then, as I said, it's something that's coming up more and more. So Steven, you're obviously an expert in this area. Why are we seeing threat modeling coming up more and more these days?
Hi, Mark, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, we're seeing a lot more activity around threat modeling. I think that the big event for us was in 2021 when the OWASP top 10 included insecure design as element number 4 in the top 10. So that was the first time for me that I thought, threat modeling and secure design as an activity is now reaching kind of mainstream status. And the other two big events on our radar were, number one, the FDA, which is now mandating that medical devices need to include a threat model before they will be approved for sale in the US, which is a massive step, even though it's now 2023. And now is the first time that somebody who's implanting a device in a human body needs to show that they've designed it securely from the start, and what are the security risks associated with, how are they mitigating those risks. So it's great that it's there finally. And on a similar vein, the National Cybersecurity Strategy released by the White House in March this year included the word or the phrase secure by design about 5 or 6 times in that strategy. So I think it's fantastic that now there is this emphasis on not only do we need to get the implementation of what we're doing right, we need to avoid the bugs, good. We also need to have a good plan and a good design, like from the start, like which bugs are we going to correct, which flaws are we going to correct, which things are we going to mitigate and which things aren't we going to mitigate. So having that done as a secure design activity or threat modeling activity, I think it's fantastic that it's happening now. Yeah.
I mean, you're making me have post-traumatic stress disorder when it comes to the FDA. But yeah, the FDA, you started, probably like well over a decade ago now, but started talking about, hey, you need to do, code analysis, but then was really kind of very loosey-goosey in kind of like what you need to do, and in concrete terms. And then that became more concrete. Then now threat modeling's in there. So and we're really shifting it left now. But I mean, I'll be honest, when I talk to development organizations, I feel that they don't really have a good handle on what threat modeling actually is, why it's important. And then, because we have that very low level of understanding, is figuring out, okay, well, how do we actually do this in a meaningful way? So, if I think about it, what are your tips? What do you see from the point of view of the practices that organizations should face? How they make this work in practice, should I say?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that we also come across with development teams. And the question, when we ask a development team, are they doing threat modeling? Maybe they're not familiar with the term. And they'll say, no, we're not doing threat modeling. Why should we do that? And say, well, do you do design at all before you start building things? Like, yeah, of course we do design. We're going to, even if we're agile, we have a sprint. We'll plan what we're going to do in that sprint. We have designs for the user stories that we're implementing, and we'll have a design for the functional aspects of that user story. And that's exactly where we need to kind of hook in from a security perspective and say, all that threat modeling is it's designing for security. Right. So that same mentality that you have when you're thinking about a design, you should be thinking about threats, and you should be thinking about how would somebody abuse what we are building now? How would an attacker attack this? And consequently, what are we going to do to build a robust and defensible application there? In terms of how to get started on this and what we've seen work within organizations, what really works well is a security champions program, and that the security champion who's responsible for other aspects of AppSec also has a responsibility for threat modeling, or at least introducing threat modeling into the teams. And it doesn't need to be a big, complex activity. You know, it could be as simple as every time you're doing a piece of design, have a dedicated piece of time where you're looking at that design and you only need to ask 4 questions, right? What are we building? The thing in front of you. This is the thing we're building. What could go wrong? So what could an attacker do here? What are we going to do about each of those things that could go wrong? And finally, did we do a good job? So this is Adam Shostak's 4-question framework on how to think about threat modeling. What I like about it is it's very accessible and very easy to understand what you need to do there. I think where development teams, if they're working on their own, the part where they will need a bit of assistance is that second question: what can go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And from an engineering perspective, you're usually thinking in terms of, you know, how's this thing going to fall over on its own, or how is the performance going to be impacted? What you don't necessarily think is, how is an intelligent attacker going to deliberately try and abuse this functionality, or deliberately try and break it? And that's where it's useful to get the security team's involvement, or to look at online resources like the MITRE's CAPEC, it's the attack pattern library, as well as, you know, using internal wikis or tooling that can help you answer that kind of question, try and figure, well, if this is the thing I'm building, what are the kinds of things that an attacker could do here? And if, you know, companies start with that, I think it's a great way for them to start getting that mentality going within the engineering teams to think about how is this going to break? How is somebody going to attack this?
Yeah, it's almost like a slightly different mindset. I mean, I think about this from, you know, people understand that QA, quality assurance, you know, testing requires a different mindset, right? You're trying to break it, not prove that it works. It's saying, you know, yes, you validate, make sure it works, but really the ultimate goal is to find the corner cases. So, and to, you know, it's interesting that also you build upon the security champions, because that really is bringing one person in the team as having a focus in this area, but with the goal of disseminating that thought process. When you look at the way that these teams are evolving, do you see kind of like a maturity curve? I mean, I know I referenced the PBC maturity stuff a few moments ago. Do you see that maturity in organizations? Do you see like quick wins that somebody can say, hey, you know, if you do these things that are pretty basic, you're going to get some, you know, quick win, but then you go more advanced to get you know, additional benefits?
Yeah, you know, on the topic of maturity, I'm glad you mentioned QA, because if you go, you know, way back in software development, QA used to be a completely separate team that just did quality. Developers built stuff, and QA tested stuff, and there was no overlap between those 2 disciplines. And then when, you know, unit testing started becoming popular, integration testing started becoming popular, that became a blurred area. Now developers were testing their own code, or they were writing the tests to validate that their own code worked. And I think that's a natural evolution of where security needs to get to. Security is just another characteristic of software that you need to care about. You need to care about quality, you need to care about performance, and you need to care about security. And it's just because security has been such a specialized area that it's been off here in the side. But ultimately, it's going to be part of the regular development workflow. And that's the natural evolution of things if we look at the way QA and testing happened. In terms of, you know, quick wins, what can organizations do? I'd have a look at there's an open source page up on GitHub published by Autodesk, and the guy who published it is Iyzar Tarandak. And it's a very simple kind of 10 or 15 categories of attacks that you would need to look at for something that you're designing. And I think it's a great way to get started. You know, let's not look at the entire world of possible attacks. Let's just look at these 10 or 15 things that could go wrong with what we're building. And then, you know, identify, can this go wrong with the thing we're building? Or have we thought about how to defend ourselves against it? That's a good place to start.
I think that's really good as well, because I think, there's the boiling the ocean, it's like it's a big world, right? And if you can take a small bite, you're going to get some significant progress. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. This was a great chat. And thank you everybody for watching. I think we need to come back and do another episode, because I think this conversation's got me thinking about a few things. So let's do that. Let's get you back on the show and we'll continue this conversation. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you everybody for watching. You want to say goodbye?
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. And thanks for having me on. Definitely interested in doing a follow-up.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, everybody. Take care and stay tuned for the next episode.